I know what you're thinking. What do you mean it has a problem? God of War Ragnarok is the greatest game ever, right? Well, in most ways, you're right. But when I finished the main storyline of the game, I was kind of left thinking, was that it? Let me tell you why.
Your father tells me you found it there.
Groa? The Knowledge Keeper?
First of all, I just want to say that I did like God of War Ragnarok. The animation is amazing, the dialogue and actor performances are superb.
You can't even say you're sorry this time, can you?
And hacking away at Einherjar with the Leviathan axe will never not be satisfying. So what's not to like? Well, it comes down for me to the storyline, the character motivation and consequences, and the ending. In the previous God of War Ragnarok from 2018, Kratos and Atreus had one clear goal. Atreus' mother, the giant Fae, had just died, and for her last wish, she wanted them to spread her ashes from the highest point in the realm. Kratos didn't want to undertake this journey immediately because he didn't think that Atreus was ready.
What do I do? Our son is not ready to carry your ashes to the top of the mountain.
However, they are forced to go when their home is attacked by Balder.
I thought you'd be bigger.
Kratos didn't want to have anything to do with the gods of Asgard and just wanted to be left in peace, but he was dragged into this conflict. The philosopher Aristotle from Kratos' homeland of Greece said that a story could be defined in 3 acts. In the first act, you chase your heroes up a tree. In the second, you'll throw rocks at them. And in the third, you'll get them down from the tree. So if we apply that kind of thinking to God of War of 2018, Laufey's death and the goal to spread her ashes changes the status quo. They are chased up a tree by Balder and are forced on their journey. They are continuously attacked by Balder, Magni and Moody and the other dangers of the realm. They are the ones throwing rocks at them. They defeat Balder and spread the ashes. They get down from the tree and return home. The most important aspects of this, I think, is that Kratos and Atreus are chased into the journey. Their journey had a clear goal and that goal guides their actions. And if you're thinking, well, not all games have a goal narrative like that, I would say that all great narrative-based games have exactly that. In Red Dead Redemption 2, Arthur Morgan wanted to have enough money to disappear with a gang. In The Last of Us, Joel had to deliver Ellie to the Fireflies to find a cure for the cordyceps fungus. In Ghost of Tsushima, they wanted to kick out the Mongols by any means necessary. Now, I'm not saying that they always need to finish their goal, but their goal has to be shown so we know why they do what they do. And they have to be forced into action. Now, let me ask you a question. What is the goal, the clear objective of God of War Ragnarok?
I don't want to fight anyone. I just want answers.
And if those answers lead to war with Asgard?
Fairly early on in the game, we found out that Groa, the one who predicted Ragnarok, lied to Odin about Ragnarok being the destructions of all the realms, and that she really foresaw that only Asgard would be destroyed. A clear objective here would be, we just cause Ragnarok, right? But no, because Kratos doesn't want to be the god killer anymore. Therefore, Atreus is the only one who wants to pursue Ragnarok to defeat Odin. But his objectives changes halfway through the game when Atreus learned that causing Ragnarok would also mean the death of Kratos.
No. It's not right.
Then Atreus' goal becomes to ensure that his dad doesn't die. The journey for me is like really kind of muddy, and because of that, there isn't someone or something that forces them on the journey. No one chases them up a tree. The visit of Thor and Odin doesn't have the same effects as the visit of Baldur did in the previous game, because it doesn't change anything. They already knew that they would come at some point due to them having already killed 2 of the Aesir, so the visit of Odin and Thor was kind of predictable.
Back before winter set in, there were some misunderstandings. Regrettable ones.
Yes, they again have to flee the house and they go to Sindri's house, but from there the objectives seem random. Most of the objectives doesn't do anything to add to the overall narrative. Kratos and Freya goes to Vanaheim to break Odin's spell on her, not so she can help with Ragnarok, but to mend some old wounds. They go to Helheim to capture or kill the Hellhound Garm to stop the Helltears, and of course they rescue Tyr from Svartalheim for no reason other than they think he's alive and that he might know something about the giants. Of course, Tyr turns out to be Odin, but more about that later. The point is that I don't feel that many of the decisions the characters make is for a narrative purpose. The things they do make sense, but it doesn't add to drive the story forward. For example, they didn't have to free Tyr to go visit the shrine in Elfheim. His tag-along is pointless narratively. And that brings me to... Now, I talk about the storyline, and usually the thing that pushes a storyline forward is the character motivation to take certain actions and the consequences of those actions. Halfway through the game, something dawned on me. This is not the story of the God of War. This is not Kratos' story. This is Atreus' story. Kratos has a supporting role in Ragnarok rather than being the main protagonist. His motivation, as it has always been, is to protect Atreus. That is his drive and his reasons to follow him.
Believe in any of it.
And still I follow. Because all that matters is that you are safe.
Kratos' drive to protect Atreus is the entire reason that they set out on the journey in the first game, and the whole reason he ends up killing the Aesir, which sets up the story in Ragnarok. It had consequences. This ties together with my previous points, that the things Kratos doesn't move the story forward, as it doesn't have any consequences. The best example of this is that Kratos and Freya end up killing Nidhogg. It doesn't impact Ragnarok any way whatsoever. I mean, yeah, Freya is free from Odin's curse, but her contributions to the story forward is minuscule at best.
Get rid of me!
So this is all about Atreus and his story, and we can therefore think of Kratos as a supporting character. Now, this is somewhat a problem, because for most of the game we play as Kratos, because of course he is the God of War. He is presented as still being the main character, but he doesn't do main character stuff. He's a side character to Atreus' story, which is mainly the reason why we get to play as Atreus so much, which I do appreciate, by the way.
That cannot be my future. It says I serve Odin and my father dies.
However, let's return to Atreus' motivation. I've talked briefly about Atreus changing motivations halfway through the game. Let's list them. He wants to find Tyr. He wants to cause Ragnarok because he's the Jotnir champion. And lastly, he wants to change destiny. For me, the game's story really started when Atreus dreamed his way to Jotunheim and Angrboda shows him his destiny. Everything that came before was more of a prologue. Here Atreus learns that not only is he destined to go to Odin in Asgard, but that Kratos will die. Here he gets his primary motivation, and suddenly the roles are reversed. He wants to protect his father, as Kratos has always wanted to protect him.
Who's keeping you safe?
I do not need you to protect me.
I really like that, and it made a lot of sense, but then he does something radical. From being really adamant about not going to Odin, he suddenly decides to go and become a spy.
But I'd be going for us. I gotta stop something bad from happening.
Something bad did happen!
Now, I can kind of forgive this narrative decision, even though I do think it's a little bit out of character to see him go so soon after learning his destiny. I would have found it more believable if Atreus somehow himself had discovered the existence of the truth tear in Asgard. That would make his move to Asgard more of a risk worth taking instead of going on a whim of teenage rage.
Let go of me!
Listen!
I said let go!
What the fuck? Atreus! It's Sindri. Just try to keep control!
Fair enough, at least it moves the story forward. But then in Asgard he is really quick to somewhat trust Odin and help him in his pursuit for the mask.
I'm not really sure why I came to Asgard. But I realize now it wasn't to be a spy.
And honestly, the mask is a MacGuffin. And if you're not familiar with that term, I don't blame you, but a MacGuffin is basically an object to move the story forward, but is otherwise pointless.
It's always called the thing that the characters on the screen worry about, but the audience don't care.
Now, I say it's a MacGuffin because it doesn't have any real impact on the narrative either. It just gives Atreus something to do in Asgard. And in his search for the mask, it leads Atreus to release Garm in Helheim, which makes him sad and want to go home. Again here, his motivation for returning home doesn't sit well with me. I'm not presented with a reason because Atreus first learns of the damage he's done after he's returned to Sindri's. And when he returns, the narrative consequences of him having gone to Asgard is nowhere to be found. And yes, I know that them going to Helheim and installing Fenrir in Garm is a pretty big consequence, which helps them escape later, but bear with me, I'll touch upon that in just a second. Because I have yet to talk about the biggest consequence of Atreus in the entire game. The rescue of Tyr.
Better that than to live to see Ragnarok.
If they hadn't rescued Tyr, who was actually Odin, Brock wouldn't have died and they wouldn't have band together to start Ragnarok. But wait, didn't I say before that the rescue of Odin disguised as Tyr were also pointless narratively? Yes, I did. And the reason for that brings me to... Let's talk about Tyr. In my opinion, they did Tyr dirty, they done fucked it up. Maybe one of the reasons I feel that way is the way Tyr has been presented in the trailer material for the game. We learned in the previous game that he's supposed to be dead, and now suddenly he exists. When I saw that, I was hyped. And that wired my brain to think that he would have a bigger role in the game, which he didn't. I do understand the reasoning behind it somewhat. If Tyr is really Odin, it would make sense for him to forsake any kind of violence, because it gives Odin an excuse to do nothing to help Kratos and Atreus. The problem with that is that I don't care about Tyr. It's a weird feeling because I wasn't shocked when he turned out to be Odin, but I didn't really expect it either. He hadn't become a big enough part of the game at that point that the reveal did anything to me. I needed to somewhat care more about the character so that the shock of him being Odin would have had a bigger impact. I would like to have seen him and Kratos go on a mission together to rescue Atreus from something, where he then goes back on his promise of violence, because remember, Odin needs Atreus. So if he was in some kind of danger, it would be in his interest to actually help Kratos. But we get none of that. And it bugs me, it really do, because as I've said before, he's pointless to the narrative. The sole purpose of Tyr in the game is to be revealed as Odin and killing Brock. And that isn't enough for me. I mean, in terms of the scoreboard, Kratos has killed Baldur and Magni, and Odin has killed Brock. Is it really justifiable to go all in on Ragnarok because just one of the good guys is dead?
Now we kill Odin. And anyone who gets in our way.
Justice is not what we seek. It is vengeance.
Like, what? Really? That's good old-fashioned revenge, and I was really surprised to see that the game went down that road, because they know that innocent people may end up dead, which they realize halfway through the assault anyway. It doesn't make sense to me.
They shouldn't be here. They're not soldiers.
Odin put them in our path to die. I was wrong, Atreus.
And speaking of the assaults on Asgard and the final moments of the game, I am seriously missing something more grandiose. Grandiose. I don't know how you pronounce that. When I saw the monster Ragnarok and Thor and Jormungandr fighting in the distance, I wanted to be over there. Not running around and fighting Einhidjar as I've done through most of the game anyway. Remember in the first game, in the final fight against Baldur and Freya, Freya controls a death giant and Atreus calls upon Jormungandr to goddamn bite his head off.
Well done, boy.
Man, that was awesome. But in Ragnarok, we are looking at a distance. The stakes sort of felt higher in the first game. Why couldn't the fight with Thor have taken place over there, where we try beating him together with the serpent? It's really a missed opportunity. We fight Thor, then we fight Odin in the exact same location. They defeat Odin and get rescued by angry Boda and Fenrir, and that's the game. Now, I mentioned earlier that I would talk about Fenrir as one of the consequences that Atreus makes. And yes, them planting Fenrir in Garm does make it so they can escape. But it feels so bland, because I was expecting more of Fenrir's role. Now, this might be due to the fact that I am actually from Denmark, which is one of the countries where Norse mythology actually comes from. And that's exactly the reason why I expected more of Fenrir, because in the original, real Ragnarok legend, Fenrir is the one who ends up killing Odin. And that knowledge cursed me in the way of thinking that Fenrir would be part of the fight. But he wasn't. This, of course, won't be the case of all players, and I may be wrong here, but tell me in the comments how you felt about the final.
Thank you for saving us.
So to sum it all up, God of War Ragnarok is a good game, but it's missing some key elements to get me more invested in the story. The storyline is a bit all over the place. The changing of destiny seemed to be the overall character arc for Atreus and Kratos, and the closest we get to an overall goal in the game. Atreus wants to save his father from dying. He wants to change that destiny for him to die in Ragnarok. But my problem is that it's introduced far too late in the game. I mean, we knew from the first game that Kratos was destined to die because Kratos had seen that in the last part of the first game. But Atreus didn't know that, and he finds out far too late for it to have an impact on the story going forward. That put together with the kind of underwhelming use of characters and the ending overall makes it so that I far prefer the game that came before. But what do you think? Am I wrong, or do I have a point? Let me know. Oh, and one last thing, and this is actually like the stupidest thing in the entire game. You can actually find the real Tyr in a prison in Niflheim, where the real reunion is really pointless and underwhelming. Because again, there's not even a cutscene or something like it doesn't. It's just like cherry on top of like Tyr fuckery. And if they make a Tyr DLC, I'm gonna be extremely mad. See ya.